Okay, so this is skill one, jumping into tuck handstand into the straight line, and then jumping into handstand split, and then into the straight line. And essentially what we're doing now is putting together the strength, putting together the alignment, putting together the proprioception and the brakes, so that we can begin to balance in the handstand position. So the first one that we're going to work on here is tuck handstand, and it's actually probably the hardest handstand. I think at least muscularly as much physical strength as is required to balance within it, because it's sort of like almost like bakasana. You know, it's a very sort of big, wide balance to stabilize. And so we're going to start with a wall drill to help us. And what typically happens when we're in our handstand, when we're entering and exiting the handstand, is that we lose a lot of the extension in the shoulders. We tend to bend the back. We tend to open the hips. And so what we want to do is remain really disciplined, and that's the secret to being able to move into the move within the handstand. So your handstand initially is all about stabilizing, but once you're stable, then you can mobilize, then you can move and change shapes without it being much of a problem. So the first position, just to sort of reinforce this habit, so when I'm coming into my tuck position, what I need here is good shoulder extension. So if I let this relax, the body's going to start to fall. So I want to extend here, push the back into the ground, push the butt up away from the ground, reach the tailbone back. So I'm going to keep all of that action while I move forward and back from tuck position. So it's really easy to lose this because it's a lot of work. So next I'm going to walk up to the wall, and you'll be about, I would say, 18 inches away from the wall. You'll have to play around a little bit with this. But the main focus should be not moving, but what we're stabilizing, what we're holding. So I'm going to have the shoulders extended up, the back body pushing up, the glutes pushing forward, tailbone drawing up towards the ceiling as I pull the knees down. So we'll do this depending on how strong you are initially. You know, you can start with just playing with 1 repetition. Eventually you want to work up to about 5 repetitions and walk up the wall. And again, being about 18 inches away from the wall, bring the weight into the hands and stabilize. Push the back away from the wall, hips towards the wall. Reach the tailbone up. Keep pushing the ground away. Oh, and by the way, I'm wearing socks to slide. This is much easier unless you have a slippery wall. So the goal here again is while I'm doing the movement, that all of these other actions are staying relatively still. Yeah. Whew. And that's very, very, very hard work. Okay, so from here we're going to do a thoracic spine and shoulder mobility exercise. So I'm bringing the hands to the wall, turning them out just a bit. Try to keep the arms relatively straight. I'm going to move the hips away from the wall. They call this a hollow back position. And then I'm going to push the hips towards the wall. Lift the back, drop the chin, and then look up at the hands, push the chest towards the wall, pull the hips back and down. So I'll do 5 of these, slowly rolling up the back. And release, shake it out. You'll repeat that step 1 more time. And then we're going to move into our handstand tuck, freestanding position. And so when you're using the wall, use the wall very purposefully. So a lot of times, again, if we're looking for the wall, what is the wall doing? The wall is the brakes, right? So if you always use the wall, your wall is always going to be the brakes, and you're not developing real brakes. Does that make sense? So the hands have to become the brakes here, the hips have to become the brakes here in order for you to ever have some realistic handstand practice away from the wall. So that again is going to be our main priority. Don't worry so much here about balancing. We're starting to plant that seed, but make sure that you're not sort of falling all over the place, that these are very slow, controlled attempts. So we'll get up to about 5 attempts in the tuck. If you're balancing from tuck, just like we were doing in the wall, you can come all the way up to the straight handstand. So from this position, we're going to bring the hands maybe about 2 feet in front of the feet. And then again, our shoulders are about halfway between plank and downward facing dog. I'm going to activate, lift the back, come up. To the handstand, come back, down. Relax, take a moment, just rest, and then we'll come back and repeat. So again, every time I put the hands on the ground, very, very important. I'm doing the same thing each time. And it becomes sort of like a meditation. It becomes sort of like our Surya Namaskar. It should be very, very relaxing. If you fall out of it, no big deal. Notice what you did. And then again, come back to this whole setup. So I'm bringing the hands onto the ground about 2 feet in front of the feet. I'm going to stabilize here. Come back down, pushing the whole way. So again, pushing the whole way. Remember this exercise we did in the third installment of this. Every time I bring my feet back onto the ground, until the weight's in my feet, my hands are pushing actively. So this is again going to sort of train your body the whole time to sort of keep the balance point, right? So even when you're off center, and this is another thing, is even when you're off center, you should still be attempting to rebalance. Okay, so after we get through all of this alignment work, strength work, proprioceptive work, then it's all a matter of noticing when you're out of balance and adjusting. So we have tools, corrective tools of adjustment. So just like when you're standing, if you lean forward, what adjusts you is your feet. So your ball of the foot digs in and it pushes you back into the position. So it's the same thing with your hands. When you're in the hand stand and you're leaning forward, you want to push down into the palm knuckles, push down into the fingertips to bring you back into alignment. So when you're leaning back, think here about the abdomen is pulling back. So almost like a Kapalabhati yoga, Kapalabhati breath if you're familiar with yoga. But this, so we did that in the second or third installment, this hollow body with the Kapalabhati breath where we're pumping the navel. Okay, so one more time, we're going to come and do our tuck handstand position. If you're balancing, I want you to play around with adjustment, with pressing into the fingers, pressing into the palms if you feel like you're leaning too far over your hands, and if you feel like you're falling away from the hand, if the weight's on the heel, think about Kapalabhati. Okay, so one more time, hands about 2 feet away, same thing. Lift the back, engage, right up. So if you're balancing here, play around with the balance. Where's the weight in the hands? Actively adjust if you need to. And then come back down. Taking about 5 attempts here. Take a rest, okay? Next, skill that we're going to work on here, handstand split. So this is probably the skill that people are most familiar with. With the handstand split, you may have some success with it because it's sort of, your balance is sort of spread out a little bit more, and you can find some sort of balancing between the two legs that are split in opposite directions. So I want to go more into the alignment here. It's typically what happens in our handstand split is that this leg that we're jumping off of, the hip tends to sort of not have any sort of stability. It's just sort of falling in whatever direction it wants to. And so when you jump up, you may stabilize with your hands, but then the hip just sort of falls into any old place, and it becomes very, very random on whether or not you're actually balancing each time that you jump into it. So again, with this position, we're looking at hip extension. What I want you to do here is keep your hips extended and lift your right foot off the ground. And then we're going to fold from the hip while keeping the glute, which is pushing the hip forward. Keep the glute active. Come back up. Try this a few times, actively pushing the hips in this direction. You'll feel here hamstring, back. 2 more times. And so as we're doing this as well, we're keeping the shape while shifting our orientation. And so it takes a lot of sort of awareness to keep the muscles active, to keep the alignment while we're moving, which is precisely what you need to do with your standing split or with your handstand. So again, hips are pushing forward into extension. I'm going to come into my warrior 3 on the left leg, and then come back up, pushing the hips forward, back up. One more time, pushing the hip forward, and back up. I think this is harder to do than the actual handstand itself. Shake it out. So now, again, coming back to hips and shoulders. Hips are working in the opposite direction that the shoulders are working. So, same thing that I did with my tuck position. I'm going to set up for my handstand split with the hands about 2 feet in front of the feet. So not way over here, but back 2 feet in front of the foot. You can bring one foot in the middle, lift the other leg, push the hips down, lift the back. So now here, again, get used to shifting and resisting. So don't think here about coming into the balance, but shift and push yourself back. Get used to that concept of shifting, pushing the weight back, shift, push the weight back, and then come into your handstand. So, with your handstand split, think about here about what you're doing with the other leg. So the other leg, we have here, the first leg that's up is pushing forward. The other leg that's bending to jump from is coming up into flexion. So that hip flexor is involved. So there's a little bit of tension here between the leg and the core. So this is squeezing into the center of the body. So you want to keep that tension, and you can carry that forward into a they call this stag handstand, where the knee is squeezing into the navel. So again, the hands are down, it's about 2 feet in front. Activate, push the butt down. So the leg comes right up. And in. And then coming down, push, push, push. Roll your hips down. So just like where I started from, come right back to that position, okay? So getting used to, again, not bailing out of the handstand, but when you feel fatigued, try to lower down really slowly. So work on these two drills with your handstand, hovering, keeping this hip engaged, and then back. So doing this maybe sets of 5 here. And then going into your handstand split practice again, maybe a set of 3 on each leg. Resting in between, come up, find your line, come back down really slowly.